Hi everyone, welcome to the MRP Tech Podcast. This is episode 181. My name is Matt, and this is the weekly podcast discussing everyday tech for everyday people. In this week's episode, what I'd like to do is talk to you all about some of my favorite things about System 76 that I don't get to talk about a whole lot. And I want to talk about specifically this week Pop! OS 20.04, which was just released on April 30th. Before I get into that, I want to point you in the direction to my website, mrptechreviews.com. That's where you're going to find all of the postings of the recent episodes, all the way back to episode number 1, as well as any other information sometimes I like to post as well. So this past week, Pop! OS has been released. Pop! OS 20.04 has been released, and I want to talk to you all about some of the great things that I've found about it. Now, I want to talk really quickly about my relationship with Pop! OS so you kind of get the idea of what I think about Pop! OS and why it's my Linux distribution of choice. So in years past, as I mentioned last week, in years past, I have run everything from Ubuntu to Linux Mint to Fedora to Arch Linux, Manjaro, and Tergos. The list goes on. And there are really great things about all of them. And there are things that I'm not very particularly happy about when it comes to all of those things. And for me, I either want one of two things. I either want a very stable machine that is not going to change very much, that's not going to become corrupted over time, something that's just rock solid that I don't want to have to deal with on a particularly frequent basis. And then there's the other side of me that likes the bleeding edge software, that doesn't mind problem solving, that really likes new material, new software, new updates every day. And so that's why in the past I've gone from long-term support releases of Ubuntu to Arch Linux, which is bleeding edge software all around. Now, the thing here is years ago I purchased an old System 76 laptop off of eBay. It was a Gazelle G7, I want to say, and I really liked the hardware. Wasn't the most pretty looking thing laptop I've ever seen, but at the same time it really was a workhorse of a laptop, and that's really what I liked about it. And so time went on, and that computer eventually had some issues with a couple of the USB ports on it, and which I kind of had from the very beginning when I purchased it on eBay. But I liked it so much that I didn't complain about it, and it really didn't bother me all that much. But as time went on, it became a much more computer that I needed to rely on. And so eventually I phased it out, and I wanted to purchase a new System 76 laptop. And I wanted to buy it brand new from System76.com. And they had just upgraded or released the newer models of it at the particular time. It was around June-ish of a couple of years ago. And I had the choice was whether I was going to stick with Ubuntu or if I was going to try Pop! OS for the first time. Now, I had not thought positively about Pop! OS. In fact, I still really don't care for the name Pop! OS, but over the last few years, it really has kind of turned into something of its own. And now my original goal was to try Pop! OS for a little while and then hop back over to something that I was more familiar with, like Ubuntu or Linux Mint or even Antergos, but at that time, Antergos was sort of phasing out, and now they are no longer. And Antergos was one of my favorite distros for a long time, just because it was an easy Arch Linux install, and it sort of took a lot of the issues with Arch Linux away and made it a more stable environment. Not that Arch is unstable to begin with, but it was much easier to just have a fresh install of Antergos rather than going through the entire Arch Linux install, which is time consuming for me, and I don't have a whole lot of free time. So I stuck with Pop! OS, and it was Pop! OS 18.04, and I have run 18.04 for over 2 years now, and I had no ambition whatsoever of changing to a different Linux distro at this point. When I had finally caught up and realized that 2004 was coming around, I actually tried to upgrade a little earlier. I wanted to jump on the beta test for 2004. And luckily, thanks to my backup software here, TimeShift, I was able to restore my computer after it went boom, okay? For some reason, when I tried to install the beta of 2004, it was trying to reinstall 1804, and I'm not really sure what happened. I was following the instructions to the letter, and it just was trying to pull down 1804 again, and that put my updater into a boot loop, which it didn't recover from any time that I tried it. So I decided to take a step back, and I restored the laptop. And TimeShift is a great tool if you've never used it before. I highly recommend that for any Linux user to put it on their system, because it really makes restoring a critical error much easier than it has been in the past. So I decided to wait until 2004 came out, and I got a little impatient, so I upgraded to 1910 just to check that out for a day or two. And then on April 30th, Pop! OS was released. And right off the bat, one thing that I noticed was a little bit more polished than previous. Pop! OS has always looked nice compared to Ubuntu, but in this case, Pop! OS is very clean looking. The drop-down menus are very fresh looking, and there's a lot of new features that I want to talk about today as far as what I really am looking forward to in Pop! OS. I just kind of want to go through those a little bit with you. So if you go to pop.system76.com, you'll see probably what I would call one of the nicer looking Linux distribution websites. It's very clean, very elegant design website, and it talks about some of the features of Pop! OS. So first of all, it says Pop! OS is designed for fast navigation, easy workspace organization, and fluid, convenient workflow. Your operating system should encourage discovery, not obstruct it. And I've seen similar quotes on other websites in the past, but I really want to say one of my favorite things about Pop! OS, it is as rock solid as a Linux distribution as I have ever used. It has not stuttered in 2 years. It has been fast, it has been secure, it has been everything that I needed to be, including just getting out of my way and getting work done. And so that sort of mission statement right there, designed for fast navigation, easy workspace organization, and fluid, convenient workflow, I really think that that is a true statement as far as any mission statement. I would say that's probably what Pop! OS is. And I know that people have different desktop environments of choice. Mine happens to be Gnome, and I really like the Gnome environment. It just seems everything is a couple of clicks away. I don't have to really dig deep into files or anything like that to get to system settings. I don't have to dig deep in menus for system settings. The settings are really one click away, and I have all of my system settings within range here. And it's just so easy to just get work done. If I need to make a quick change in the settings, I can. I don't have to dig through menus and find where it was. It's very, very easy to find everything. And I just like the way GNOME 3 looks. I like how the applications are one click away, and the fact I love the way Pop! OS the theming options in Pop! OS. They give you a couple different options. I tend to look for the more standard theme and icon sets. I don't really care for the more visual icons, but at least they're all there in case I want to go back and check them out at one point in time or another. The coolest thing about Pop! OS 2004 is this auto tiling feature. And if you're watching the YouTube video, you go up to the top menu and there's a new tile windows manager where you can turn it on very easily. And what I really like about this is that if I'm opening up new applications, such as Chrome or Firefox or a terminal, the auto tiling portion will organize these, and it's more useful for if you are looking for, let's say, if you're using a really big display, this will be really handy for you. And the auto tiling will change depending on what windows you have open, and really makes for efficient workflow. And especially if I'm doing some editing, or if I am moving back and forth between the terminal or two different windows, file windows, it really just makes life easy. The windows are auto resized anytime that I want to do it. That's probably my favorite feature here of the new Pop! OS. And there are all sorts of other navigational type improvements with Pop! OS, and they're all just a short click away. For instance, keyboard shortcuts now. There's a pop-up menu that is literally one click away, and you can find all of the common keyboard shortcuts along with some of the newer ones as well. And it really goes to show you how much thought has gone into 2004 in Pop! OS compared to, say, Ubuntu. Now, I will say some really good things about Ubuntu 2004. Obviously, Pop! OS is based off Ubuntu 2004, and 2004, as far as Ubuntu is concerned, is probably one of the nicer releases over the last several years. And it is a long-term support, so it's supported for 5 years, just as Pop! OS is also now supported for 5 years. So with the improvements with Gnome, you have improvements in workspaces and keyboard navigation, as I mentioned. Just like any other Linux distribution, you have lots of different toolkits. Pop! OS has often been called a developer's Linux distribution just because there's a lot of tools made easy for developers, whether you're using apt or Flatpak or anything like that. Some of the comments really got to me that I wanted to just show a couple here on the website. And the second one here is, when I first got my System 76 laptop, I decided to use Pop! OS until it annoyed me, and then I would switch to my Linux distro of choice. 2 years later, I'm not only still using it, but it's become my favorite Linux distro of choice. That is a true statement that was not mine. That's put out by Robert H., whoever that is. And that is exactly how I feel about Pop! OS. I had originally started, and I was just going to test it out. I was just going to use it for a little bit, and quickly it became my Linux distro of choice. And would I put it on every single laptop that I have? Probably not, but I do have my old System 76 laptop still, and I had installed Pop! OS, a fresh install of Pop! OS on that laptop, and it works great, even though it's a laptop from 2012, so an 8-year-old laptop at this point in time. So the mix here is that Pop! OS is not just for System 76 hardware, but it can be installed on anything. I had it running in a VM at one point in time, and it worked great. So if you're looking for something that's pretty rock solid, I would highly recommend System 76. One of the great things about it, you have the encryption out of the box. So Pop! OS is going to encrypt your default installation, and you don't even have to think about it when you're installing. So everything is encrypted, and it doesn't bother you. It doesn't like scream and holler you about updates. If it has security updates, it lets you know. Everything is all up to you. It doesn't collect any personal data from you or anything like that. And one of the things that I also enjoy about Pop! OS is, especially on a System 76 laptop, is that when there is not even talking about updates, but when there are firmware updates to the hardware of the laptop that I'm particularly using, System 76 also supplies the drivers and driver management for this device, so that it very easily installs on Linux. In the past, I've had like a Dell laptop or an HP laptop where you could only install firmware updates if you were running Windows. So you either had to dual boot or skip those updates entirely. And, that puts yourself at risk a little bit when you're running Linux and you don't have that up-to-date firmware. So I really like the fact that System 76 is providing the tools necessary to keep your system secure. So on the other hand, when it comes to software, because you're running things like you're running an Ubuntu base, you have the software available that you would have on Ubuntu, whether you're getting it from the POP store itself, or if you are using apt, or if you're using Flatpak, or if you're going to a website and just wanting to install a deb package, they're all going to install quite well. And there's only been a few things that I've had trouble with installing, but usually if I looked around a little bit, I could resolve that issue fairly quickly, and that's pretty common in Linux itself. One kind of fun fact, and I haven't really mentioned this on the show, is Morton in our Discord room recently reminded me about checking out the game Firewatch on Steam. And I had been playing Firewatch, and as an avid hiker, it's sort of like as he would call it, a hiking simulator. And being from the area I am, where these fire towers were stationed at top of mountains, I mentioned it before on the show, no longer being used. But Firewatch is sort of the same premise, where you're I don't know if you want to say a park ranger, and you're sort of on the lookout for forest fires. Long story short, I had been playing Firewatch this week, and I had actually gone for a hike, and I found a fire tower, and I took some pictures and shared it with everybody on Discord, just kind of as a joke, similar to this picture here in the center of the screen, holding a map and a little radio that sometimes you'll see in this game as well. A few people recognized it, but it also kind of cracked me up when Pop! OS 2004 was released, and they're talking about gaming, and they're using images from Firewatch, which is probably a 4-year-old game at this point in time. But it was kind of fun to see that what goes around comes around. I've been working on this game last week, and then Pop! OS releases, and they're also showing screenshots of Firewatch, which is a great game, by the way. I encourage you to check it out. It's a lot of mystery, a lot of walking around doing nothing, but it is a whole lot of fun. So there's other things that I'm liking too. I mentioned last week, dark mode is something that I often turn on because my eyes just can't handle computer screens. And the more that I find I like dark mode, the more I use it. For instance, on my iPhone, everything is dark mode on my iPhone. It's just, I spend so much time looking at my phone that that white background like you're seeing right now on the screen, that just drives my eyes crazy. So especially increased screen time, teaching it from home and online, dark mode is a great thing. And it's also very easily accessible as well. So as I mentioned, Pop! OS is my favorite Linux distribution currently. I've been using it for over 2 years, and I don't plan on changing it. I do quite frequently check out other Linux distributions out there. Deepin had my eye for a little bit, but I just find the workflow of Deepin confusing. If I spent a little bit more time with it, I would probably like it more. One of the things I haven't really talked about is hybrid graphics. I do not have multiple graphics cards on my laptop. I do have an i7 processor, which is pretty powerful for the most part. But apparently now in 2004, it is very easy to switch back and forth between the the 2 graphics cards if you have multiple graphics cards, which is a really nice thing. My Mac could do that. Going back all the way back to 2008, so it's nice to see some of that stuff here in Linux finally. And I know that's been around for a couple of years. So Pop! OS, you can go to pop.system76.com and you can download Pop! OS. It is a free download. You can try it on your hardware if you have an old system lying around somewhere, and tell me what you think about it. You can send me an email, mrptechreviews@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Make sure to check out podnuts.com. Podnuts is the tech podcast network. If you've never been to Podnuts, it's a great website with lots of great podcasts. Door to Door Geek has got a new show out called The Revolving Door, where he is talking about all sorts of other great podcasts that are out there. I don't know anybody who listens to more podcasts than him. So he's been really pushing that recently, and all the other great shows. There's quite a few on the Podnuts network, and I encourage you all to check them out because they're all high quality episodes and certainly some of the most knowledgeable people out there when it comes to technology topics. So thanks everybody for listening. That's going to be the end of this week's show. I hope you stick around. I hope you subscribe to the podcast on any of your favorite ways to get podcasts. You can find the video versions of this podcast on YouTube. I appreciate all of you who are listening. The best thing that you can do is just tell people about this show and recommend the show to them. That's going to do it for this time. We'll see you later, and thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.